Hello, folks. You're all very welcome back to Celtic AM, our second episode of our virtual, which we would love if it was a live show in Glasgow pre-match before heading to Ibrox. But unfortunately, it's not, and we're still stuck in lockdown. But on a positive, we can now move more than 5k. I got around the county this week. It was great, from Carlingford into Omeath, down into Greenore. So if anyone knows the wee county of Louth and you get a chance and the weather's nice, come and visit us. You won't be disappointed. It's a lovely little county. Anyway, as I said, you're all very welcome. It's been a great weekend for us. We kicked off on Thursday night with a new show, which we were originally going to call the Celtic Daz, but because it's a crap name, we decided to call it Talk from the Terrace. I was joined by my great friend from Not the View, Average Joe Miller, and we just had a laugh. It was unscripted. We just had a bit of crack, and we spoke about everything because we haven't spoken in a while, and it was kind of brought me back to our post and pre-match chats we often have in McCool's when Joe refuses to buy the first round and always leaves me to buy the first and the last. But look, I leave that for Joe to defend himself again. We also had one of my musical, I wouldn't say heroes, but certainly he had a big influence on me as a teenager, with Paul Heaton of Housemart and Beautiful South and Paul and Jackie fame on the podcast. And it was an absolute buzz for me. You can still see me. I'm still laughing. It was just wonderful to spend a couple of hours chatting to him about life, politics, music, football. So if you haven't checked out the podcast, please do so, because it's wonderful, if I do say so myself. The second part's coming up next Friday. On the show today, then, we have Scott McDonald, who not only played in Ibrox, scored in Ibrox, but he also attended a game as a fan and stood on the terraces. So it's going to be great to get his insight into the game. Another regular visitor to Glasgow, and indeed on a number of occasions to Ibrox, is Ciaran Kenny from the Nave Porrick Celtic Supporters Club. Ciaran's a social worker in Dublin and a modern-day Brother Warford, a really good community person. So it's great to have Ciaran on the show. Both Ciaran and Scott have been on the podcast in previous issues, so if you go into our library, you can have a listen to them if you want to catch up on what they have had to say in the past. Now, while I'm here, we need to get a few funds in for the fanzine to keep it going, the print edition. We have about 35 copies left of issue 114. Cost of £5, including postage, and we'd appreciate if you'd buy a copy, because with no match day sales, it's kind of hard to keep the print edition going. But we've sold out the last couple of issues, and it'd be great to sell this one now. And you can also download the digital issue, which proves popular. But I think if you're an old timer like me, you love the print issue. And indeed, the print issue of another fanzine, The Alternative View, popped in my letterbox this week, and I like to support Matt and indeed Joe at Not the View, because it's great to have so many fanzines going, and I can't forget the Shamrock as well. So when you finish buying more than 90 minutes, don't forget there's other fanzines out there, and they need your support too, because none of us have match day sales, and we're so lucky to have such a vibrant, independent fanzine scene still going with, I suppose, the death of print. So hats off to everybody involved in the Celtic fanzines. You can also support us by buying a t-shirt, and I am modelling a 3-stripe Glasgow one. So that's all on celticfanzine.com/shop. Now, the Patreon has popped up. People are saying, why don't we go Patreon and put some of our content behind the paywall? Well, the reason we haven't done it is, and we're told, you'll get this and you'll get that. The reason we haven't done it is because not everyone can afford the price of a pint or the price of a coffee. Some people may be listening to this podcast from a phone, homeless. So we want to maybe give something back to people. We've hopefully going forward, we can continue to work with charities and donate a couple of quid. But we definitely won't be going behind a paywall. But if you can afford to support us, you can support us by donating for the price of a pint or a cup of coffee. And if you're a Celtic-minded business and you have a couple of quid, with some really, I suppose, cheap sponsorship deals, if you want to sponsor an episode or come on board on the website or in the fanzine. And I thank everybody who has sponsored us so far or donated, because it's gone a long way towards rental costs, production costs, and distribution costs of all the stuff we do. So I can't thank you enough. And I'm sitting here in my own recording this, so it's kind of strange talking to yourself. But anyway, I think we've done a half decent job with the first episode of Celtic AM, and I think we've mastered the podcast now. I think Roland's done a fantastic job. I think our listeners will agree, because some of the recordings haven't been great, and he's worked wonders with the software that he has. So thank you, Roland. And to Daniel, who is editing the video content now, I thank you very much. And to all the contributors to the fanzines, thank you for many, many years of excellent articles. And as I said, I'm working on editing 115 this week, and the content is quality as always. We're very, very lucky to have a broad array of writers from different backgrounds with different views, young, old, male, female. So thank you very much. Anyway, Ibrox, great when you win, terrible when you lose. Sevco killed the game as a spectacle when they took away the away allocation. And that goes both ways. It took something away from Celtic Park as well when we had to cut their allocation because of what they'd done on us. So I could go on and on about my experience at Ibrox, but it would be great to get the history of the game from someone who knows a lot more than me about Celtic versus Rangers and Celtic versus the Newco. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you to Celtic historian and author and general know-all, David Potter.
Hello. Well, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to talk about the rivalry between Celtic and Rangers, which of course has existed since both clubs came into being. But the funny thing was that up till about the First World War, it is difficult to detect any great sectarianism between the two sets of supporters. That sometimes surprises me a little bit, and certainly there was no great animosity between the two managers, because Willie Mealy was a great friend of William Wilton, Rangers manager, who actually died in a boating accident in the Clyde in May 1920. Mealy wasn't so fond of Struth, who took over from Wilton after 1920, but he was a great friend of William Wilton. But to a very great extent, you find that although there is a rivalry between Celtic and Rangers simply because they are big teams, the real people that Celtic supporters hated in the 1890s and early 1900s were, of course, Queen's Park, who symbolised Glasgow middle-class prejudice against working-class people, and in particular against professional footballers. So if anything, it was Celtic and Rangers together, the supporters, against Queen's Park. And there is a particular myth that really needs to be exploded, and it has occurred in several books, and I really get annoyed when I read this, about the 1909 Hampden riot. I've heard the word sectarian and religion used in the context of the 1909 Scottish Cup final riot. No. In fact, what that was, or what it started off being, was a protest against there not being extra time. it was commonly believed that Celtic and Rangers would draw games first time in cup ties. They certainly did that several times in Glasgow Cup ties to get another big gate. And that, of course, was why they were called the Old Firm. That was why they were called the Old Firm, the firm being, as it were, a firm, a company in business, and they were Old Firm, and that's how they worked together to gain their money. And the 1909 Scottish Cup final started off by being a protest against them being denied extra time after the second cup final of 1909, and we're asking them to come up for a third one. And of course, things just got out of hand. I think had it been left, they could have been calmed down, had been better policing that day, but it really got out of hand. And of course, young people being young people and a wee bit of drinking, and perhaps things got really stupid. But I would have to stress there was no sectarianism in that one at all. There was very definitely in the other one, the other Hampden riot of 1980, but that was a totally different matter altogether. But up to the end of the First World War, there was no great sectarian element between Rangers and Celtic, although there was certainly rivalry, simply because they were two big teams. And it was natural, perhaps, that the Protestant working class of Glasgow would slowly go towards the team that was going to challenge the Roman Catholic side. And this, of course, was Rangers, which they did at the turn of the century. Rangers won the Scottish League 4 years in a row. But then, of course, Celtic had their great team of the Edwardian era, and up to the First World War, there was no doubt about it that the best team in Scotland were very definitely Celtic. Things changed a little bit after the Great War. Rangers came on to a very, very good team indeed under Struth, a team which really won quite a lot of leagues deservedly, and Celtic were hamstrung a little bit, I always think, in the 1920s by having emotionally unstable players. Now, we've had a few emotionally unstable players in the past. In the 1990s, one thinks of the Tres Amigos, as they were called, and there were quite a lot of players like that in the 1920s who found it very difficult to cope with the dictatorship of Willie Mealy. Willie Mealy had been a very successful dictator, oblique manager in the Edwardian time in the years immediately before the First World War, but there were people like, for example, particularly Tommy McAnally, who found it very difficult, who was a great player, who found it very difficult to cope with Mealy. Not that Celtic didn't have their great moments against Rangers. My particular favourite of that time was the semi-final of 1925, in which Celtic beat Rangers 5-0. And if you don't mind, I would like to sing part of the song that they sung to commemorate this one. And you might be surprised when you hear the tune, because you might think that it is a Rangers tune. In fact, it's not, because we had it first. And it went after the 5-0 victory, we went, "Hello, hello, we are the Timmalloys. Hello, hello, you'll know us by the noise. We beat the Rangers in the cup, was great to be alive. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5. And that was the song that they sang until well in the 1950s and 1960s to commemorate that particular victory. The only thing was, I said we beat the Rangers in the cup, was great to be alive. They tended to use a slightly different word, but we won't go into that. But that was a great moment when in 1925 Jimmy McGrory scored 2, Adam McLean scored 2, and I think it was Alec Thompson who scored the other one. It was a great game and was all masterminded by Patsy Gallagher. Now, Patsy Gallagher, of course, being himself Irish, he was able to play a wee bit, I think, on the superstitions of the 2 Rangers Ulster full-backs. Because they were prone to believe this nonsense that Rangers weren't meant to win the Scottish Cup. As we know, they went 25 years without winning the Scottish Cup from 1903 to 1928, and it was widely believed it was because there was a curse on them after the Ibrox disaster of 1902. Unfortunately, the facts don't quite fit that one, because they did win the Scottish Cup in 1903, but loads of people were convinced there was a curse over Rangers, and that's why they could win the Scottish League and the Glasgow Cup and the Glasgow Charity Cup, but they couldn't win the Scottish Cup. Eventually they did so in 1928, beating us 4-0 in a very, very comprehensive victory for Rangers after Michael John had sunk his famous penalty. And then, of course, we come to 1931 and John Thompson. Now, it would almost have to happen in a way, almost as if it was meant, that if there were a place where a Celtic player was going to be killed, it would almost, you would feel, have to be Ibrox and have to be against Rangers. It was, of course, a total accident. And not only did this accident kill John Thompson, very sadly, it also, to a very large extent, ruined the Scottish career of Sam English. He later went on and played for English clubs and did quite well, but Sam was never the same person again. It was a total accident. His knee went into Thompson's skull, which apparently was thinner than what normal people's skulls were, and Thompson died of a depressed fracture. What was very interesting about that was the way that the players and the supporters all came together. The funeral was held on Wednesday afterwards at Cardenden in Fife, and the day before that there had been a celebration at the United Church in Glasgow, the United Presbyterian Church in Glasgow, and it was attended by both Celtic and Rangers players and Celtic and Rangers supporters, so much so that Peter Wilson, who was meant to be reading a lesson at the service, couldn't get in. There were so many people there, he just couldn't force his way in. Davy Meiklejohn of Rangers was there, however, and he read the lesson at that church. And that brought the Celtic and Rangers supporters together. It didn't last long, but it showed, as happened indeed in the Ibrox disaster of 1971, that sometimes the people who support another team aren't necessarily your sworn enemies. They are just people of perhaps a different heritage, a different tradition, a different persuasion, and who support someone else. But it would have to be said that for a long time after 1931, after 1925 really, Rangers really had the beatings of Celtic more often than not. They did beat Celtic 8-1 in 1943, 1st of January 1943. That's not really counted because, of course, it was the middle of the Second World War when Celtic had a very, very poor team, and Rangers had been able to keep their men in reserved occupations, with one or two exceptions, rather like Melee had been able to do for Celtic in the First World War. He was able to keep most of his players within the distance of Glasgow, where they could play. But Rangers were a good side, 1940s, even after the war, and so on, and well into the 1950s, until, of course, we come to the League Cup final of 1957. When Celtic beat Rangers 7-1. Please forgive me if I burst into song again, because after this famous 7-1 victory, Celtic supporters started to sing in the style of Lonnie Donegan, piling on the agony, piling on the style. That's what Glasgow Celtic have been doing all this while. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ways to make you smile. Watching Willie Fernie putting on this style. And the next verse, it's exactly the same, except you say Charlie Tully, and then you can say Bobby Collins, or you can say Sammy Wilson, or whoever you want. But that was the famous 7-1 victory for Celtic against Rangers, League Cup final, 1957, October the 19th, 1957. Sadly, I was just a wee bit too young to get to that game. I wanted to go, but my mother decided rightly, well, I was only 1957, I'd only been 9-year-old, that I was maybe just a wee bit too young to go to Glasgow to see that big game. But that was a great win of Celtic over Rangers, and much sung about by Celtic supporters. And frankly, for the next few years after that, there was not really very much else to sing about, because we went through a poor spell as we tried to develop a youth policy. We had some good players, but frankly, we weren't really like it until, of course, Big Jock arrived. In particular, the 1963 Scottish Cup final was the one of the famous Hampden walkout, when Rangers scored the third goal halfway through the second half, and the Celtic end at Hampden just evaporated. It just went home. Said nothing and just went home. And this was all the more distressing because on the Saturday in the first game, Celtic had at least held their own. Billy McNeil had a great game. Frank Haffey in the goal, the much reviled Frank Haffey, also had a great game. And once or twice towards the end, a wee chap called Jimmy Johnson, and the left winger was a man called Frank Brogan. Once or twice they might just have won the day on the Saturday, but on Wednesday night, it was the following Wednesday actually, it was a week on Wednesday afterwards, Celtic, I'm afraid, just collapsed. But 1964, September the 5th, 1964, ironically the anniversary of the death of John Thompson, that had nothing to do with it, Celtic in the rain beat Rangers 3-1. And that proved to me that we could do it. And incidentally, that was the day that I heard the Celtic fans singing that song about Willie Fernie, putting on the agony, putting on the style and so on. That was the first time I ever heard that one. But we beat them 3-1. We then very sadly lost a League Cup final to them in October of that year, particularly painful, that one, because 10 days previously, Harold Wilson had won the general election for the Labour Party, and it was now believed that things were now going to change. And the same way as Labour took over from the Conservatives, so Celtic could take over from Rangers. But sadly, it didn't quite work out that way. We played well enough. Jimmy Johnson missed a chance. Bobby Murdoch missed a chance. A good penalty kick claim was denied. And Rangers in the second half just nicked the 2 goals and we lost 2-1. And that triggered a really very sad few months in Celtic's history when we went to Ibrox on New Year's Day. Jimmy Johnson got sent off, and by middle of January, Celtic were going nowhere. Until Bob Kelly suddenly admitted that he'd been wrong all along. And it might be an idea to bring back as manager a man called Jock Stein. Now, one of the things there's several things about this appointment. One was that Bertie Auld, who came back to Celtic a week or 2 before Stein was actually appointed, he claims that he knew that Jock Stein was to be appointed the manager of Celtic. And that was the reason why he came back from Birmingham City. And the other one, of course, was the religious issue. It's widely believed, not least by Jock Stein himself, that one of the reasons why Jock didn't get the job in 1961, when perhaps he should have got the job because he'd been looking after the youngsters and so on, was because of his religion. If this was so, it proves what a fool Bob Kelly was. Because, of course, the Celtic supporters immediately took to Jock Stein once they started winning. And for the 3rd time, I'm going to ask your permission if I can sing a song which possibly has sectarian undertones, so if it gets edited out, I won't be too upset. But basically, in 1965 and 1966, there was an advertisement on commercial television for Beans Means Heinz. 1,000 housewives every day pick up a can of beans and say, Beans Means Heinz. Now, the Celtic supporters adapted that one to 1,000 Catholics every day throw their rosary beads away and say, Steen, 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 because Jock Stein had become the manager of Celtic, and his religion had absolutely nothing to do with it. And of course, Celtic just took off. And the interesting thing was just how often Celtic beat Rangers. Not only did they beat them on the football field, fairly obviously, and my favourite cup final probably that I myself have seen may well be the 1969 4-0 Scottish Cup final, which was a real rout of a game. But I think more importantly, Stein beat Rangers in the moral high ground, particularly as far as religion was concerned. And this came to view in the 1976 to 1977 season. Now, in 76 to 7, neither Rangers nor Celtic were doing particularly well. Rangers had been defeated by, I think, Aston Villa or Birmingham City, perhaps, someplace in the Midlands, after which their fans had rioted. It was one of these Saturdays where the Scotland team where the squad was there and they didn't have their full team. But anyway, their fans rioted. And Willie Waddle then made the rather bizarre statement that things would be all right because we would now be willing to sign a Roman Catholic, which they'd never done up to now. They in fact didn't do so, at least not for a long while. But in the immediate aftermath of that, Jock Stein then went to sign Alfie Conn. Now, Alfie Conn had played for Rangers. He was now with Tottenham Hotspur. He was getting fed up with Tottenham Hotspur. Did he want to come back to Glasgow? And of course he did. And when people questioned this, how would a former Rangers player playing for Celtic and so on, how would this work out? Jock Stein said just calmly to the press, well, I consulted several of my players, notably Danny McGrain and Kenny Dalglish. Now, most people realise that Kenny Dalglish, Danny McGrain and Jock Stein himself, they all had one thing in common, and that was where they were likely to spend or not spend their Sunday mornings. And it was a way in which Celtic, once again drove a horse and cart through the bizarre and foolish sectarian policy that Rangers employed from 1920 until 1989. And that, of course, was when they signed their... there was all sorts of jokes went around about how Rangers wouldn't play a Catholic, except they did one day play a Catholic, but he beat them 2-1. There was all sorts of jokes like that went around Glasgow. But then in 1989, they did sign, I wouldn't say he was a very good Roman Catholic, but he'd certainly been brought up as a Roman Catholic. And his name was, of course, Maurice Johnston, who a detestable man and deserving of names like Judas and so on, as far as Celtic were concerned. But the thing about that, as far as Celtic was concerned, forget all about his religion. It was the fact that Celtic were taken to the cleaners by Rangers because they had paraded Maurice Johnston with his Celtic scarf as if he was going to sign for Celtic. And he had made the famous statement about, it's the only club I ever wanted to play for. And that was before the 1989 Scottish Cup final. I think it was the day before the 1989 Scottish Cup final. Johnson, of course, couldn't have played for Celtic because he hadn't signed. And Celtic won that game. Joe Miller's goal, you'll possibly remember that one. And they paraded him with a green-white scarf, but he hadn't actually signed. Next thing we knew, that deal was dead and he'd signed for Rangers. It was really very sad to see that happening, and it was a way that the business side of Celtic in the late 80s, early 1990s was just nowhere. They hadn't a clue, basically. And I find it very difficult to forgive the men who ran the club in the early 1990s. And anyone who was alive then will probably agree with me. But there came the revolution in March 1994, and slowly Celtic began to fight their way back. It wasn't easy. We won the Scottish Cup in 1995. We beat Rangers in the Scottish Cup quarter-final of 1997. But it was only really when Martin O'Neill took over in the early years of the 21st century that Celtic really became a good team again. And as this happened, things began to go badly with Rangers. There was a succession of bad managers. There were rumours about their financial position. There were rumours about dodgy deals that they had given to various players. And all this, of course, came to fruition, if that's the right word for it, on Valentine's Day 2012, when Rangers went into administration. You will argue, people will say, is this Rangers, or should they be called the Rangers, or should they be called Sevco or Newco, or whatever you want to call them? I'm afraid that I like to call them Rangers, because they seem to me to be Rangers with the blue strips and so on, and the Union Jacks and so on, and I would be quite glad to see us beating Rangers. I think the game that is coming soon, on Sunday in fact in the Scottish Cup, will of course be very vital to us. Sometimes I feel that Celtic versus Rangers games are a little overstated in their importance. And that's certainly true of league games. Jock Stein used to say that the points you get for beating St Mirren and St Johnstone and Partick Thistle and Falkirk and them are just the same as what you get for beating Rangers. And he was right. But so often a defeat by Rangers has triggered Celtic into a downward spiral. A great example of that, incidentally, being in 1988 when we'd won the League and Cup double, and then we went to Ibrox in August 1988, lost 5-1, and frankly never recovered for years after that. And it's one of the things you've got to be aware of. I sometimes think that Rangers games are given too much importance, and defeats by Rangers become infectious, as it were, in the lead defeats by other people. That does not really apply on Sunday. Sunday is a crucial game. I'm quite prepared to admit that I will be in a terrible state on Sunday afternoon. I'll be shouting, I'll be using bad words at the television, I'll be terrifying my dog, my wife will be horrified and embarrassed and didn't think I knew half of these words and that I'll be using, but I'm afraid the game on Sunday is really a very, very vital one indeed. It is Celtic's last chance of saving the season. I honestly do think we are good enough to beat them. I think in the last league game we were certainly the better team. I certainly would feel that. You could argue that about the New Year game as well. And I honestly think that if everybody takes their chances, and if Ryan Christie doesn't blaze the ball over the bar but takes his time and puts it low, we might get an early goal. It might make all the difference. And I think that our defence, with Christopher Ayer and Stephen Welsh, I've been very impressed with the last few games I've seen them. I know everybody criticises the defence, but I'd like to see them when they're tested. I think they might come through that. And I'm reasonably confident, insofar as anyone can be confident about a game between Rangers and Celtic. But I think we might just emerge triumphant on Sunday.
Thank you, David. Hasn't he a lovely way with words and a lovely way to tell a story? You know, take you back to those black and white days, flat caps, Celtic fans. Oh, can you imagine the point in the pub back in those days and celebrating a victory at Ibrox? Wonderful, wonderful memories. And we all have wonderful memories when we win. And I suppose moments of despair when we lose. But I suppose we can be proud of our unbroken history since 1888. That we never let a club die, even in the 90s, when the fans for Celts for Change, and before that, Save Ourselves, and Fergus McCann and David Lowe and all the people involved in saving our club from liquidation. Unbelievable. We have such a beautiful, beautiful history. And as I said, it's unbroken. And I'm going to ask some of my friends, my matchday friends now, to give us their favourite moments. So, here we go.
John Joe with the Plowboys in Philadelphia. My favourite memory, scalping the Huns, had to be the 5-1 game with Moravchik and Larson, because we hadn't done it for years and years. We were going through a bad time, and it was fucking brilliant.
Hi, it's Rick Roberts from the Sarnia, Ontario CSC and an honorary member of the Plowboys in Philadelphia. Favorite Celtic Ranger moment, New Year's game, centenary year. McAvenny scored 2, we beat him 2-0, and even a bottle to the head in Brigton after couldn't ruin my good day.
How you doing, folks? My name's Kevin Ross and I am from Crossgar in County Down, and I'm also a member of the Ballymena Shamrock Celtic Supporters Club. My most memorable Celtic Rangers game would sort of date back to August 2000 under Martin O'Neill, the famous 6-2 game. Absolutely glorious day, and who could forget Henrik Larsson's chip. Hail, hail.
Hi, I'm Liam Kelly. I'm a member of the Bournemouth Shamrock Supporters Club, and my favourite Glasgow Derby memory would have to be the 5-1 win against the new club at Celtic Park. That day always stands out for the atmosphere before the game, and then as I was sat on the segregation line, just blowing a kiss, producing a smile and a nice friendly wave to our pals. I just didn't expect to have to do that 5 times that afternoon.
Hey, how you doing there? It has to be Mrs. Dembele's hat-trick, 2016 against them when we beat them 5-1. Total and utter carnage, and Joey Barton still hasn't found his way out of Bruni's arse pocket. That's my favourite one. Jimmy Boy McCrory, Lurgan, #1 CSC.
Good morning everyone at the Celtic AM. Shimmy Dara here, Dacey Reilly, Celtic Club Belfast. I didn't get dressed for the occasion, this is my work uniform. But my favourite Celtic and Sevco game had to be the last ever one before they died, when we thrashed them 3-0. The stadium was rocking from start to finish. The displays from the Green Brigade was amazing. My favourite part of the day was when the Celtic fans were singing to them, "When will we see you again?" Obviously we'll never see them again because they died. Take care, have a good afternoon, and hail hail.
Steve Kelly from the Night Porter Club here in Dublin. Favourite Celtic and Rangers moment. Been lucky enough to been at a few games where I've seen Celtic win most of them. One that I'll mention is probably the 5-1 Dembele game. The game as a whole was brilliant, and the trip with Milish and the lads was even better. But the one that'll stick out most and live long in the memory is the 3-2 game against them in Celtic Park in April 2008 when Scott McDonald scored twice and Barry Robson scored the penalty. It was actually my first trip to Celtic Park, and it was a school trip, believe it or not. But just the whole thing, as soon as you step into Celtic Park, it just takes you away. And obviously the significance of that result, because we've obviously went on a couple of weeks later to win the league. So
hello, I'm Kerry.
And I'm Lucas, and we're from Strabane.
We're members of Legend 7 Celtic Supporters Club.
And our favourite Celtic
versus Sevco moment is from Sunday, the 29th of April 2018.
When I did Ascot and walked Celtic onto the pitch,
where we beat them 5-0 with goals from Edward Forrest,
Rogic and McGregor,
securing our 7th league title in a row.
One we'll never forget.
Hail, hail.
Up and set!
My name's Average Joe Miller, not of you fame. My favourite Celtic moment beating Rangers before they died was every single one of them, I think. Yeah, every single one of them. Loved it.
Well, it was great to hear from you, but I have to say, I can't wait till we all get back together. And I think I speak for everyone till we all get back together in the pub, whatever pub we go to before games or after games, and can chat about life, football, Celtic winning and losing. And isn't the chat in the pub brilliant? Isn't it much better than being on social media where you don't know who you're talking to or you don't know who you're answering back? And when you're sitting with your mates, you can't argue. You know, no matter if you haven't, I don't know much about tactics and I don't know about, styles of play in certain plays. What I know is from watching football, standing on the terraces, I was a crap footballer. So for me to say they should be doing this or that, but I have an opinion. But I love that opinion when I'm with my mates because like if you say something stupid, they'll just tell you to shut up or cop on. And I love that. And I miss that. I really do. It's part of the match day experience that, I've always said Celtic is more than 90 minutes and, it's about the club. It's about your mates. And talking about mates, one of my mates who I met through Celtic is Ciaran Kenny. And it was wonderful to have Ciaran chat to me because I suppose Kieran's a bit of an anorak when it comes to Celtic. He's also dedicated to his supporters club and running that bus and getting people to and from Glasgow. Getting them up on the bus, maybe 4 a.m, back to Dublin by maybe midnight. Dedication. But so many friends are made on those chariots to Glasgow. The boat, anyone that's travelled on the boat knows the crack that is on the boat. And coming back from a Rangers game, I remember coming back in the slow boat and we'd won. I think it was early in Martin O'Neill's time. And a good friend of mine, Will, who doesn't go to games anymore. So, Will, if you're watching or listening, we need you back. And he went to the gift shop and bought a tin whistle, a small, cheap penny whistle, and took it into the bar and started playing a few tunes. And the whole bar on that slow boat started a big sing-song, and it was absolutely magic. Absolutely magic. Wonderful, wonderful memories. So anyway, here's how I got on chatting to Ciaran. Well, I'm delighted today to have Ciaran Kenny with me. Ciaran is the main man on the Nave Pádraig bus these days, the chariot as they like to call it. And while his bus is pulling up at Celtic Park, I'm normally kicking off Celtic AM, so I would have loved to have Ciaran there for a chat, but I suppose better late than never, and because of lockdown, we get the opportunity.
Yeah, delighted to be here. Certainly, I'm a lot less stressed, I'd imagine, than if I was to rush into the door into yourselves, having travelled 8 hours or so from Dublin, your usual 4 a.m. departures. But listen, better late than never, as I say. Delighted on Celtic AM.
Delighted to have you, Ciaran. We had you on the podcast and we had a great old chat and a great reaction. The podcast is, thank God, people are liking what we're doing. We're trying to get a good mix of guests on between fans and maybe a few people that have done well for themselves in the arts or on the football pitch for Celtic. But yeah, we're getting a bit of I suppose, a good collection of people. But anyway, look, you on that bus, it's famous that you are the man for the top 10s, top 10 goals, top 10 players, top 10. So out of your top 10s, there has to be so many memories of games against Rangers before they died. And of course, the new club, the 9-year-old club, who are doing well actually to win a title, in 9 years. Not bad. Mathematically, they could have maybe better skills, their fans. But look, that's for them to worry about. We know exactly what we've won, and we know what we haven't won. So, Ciaran, if I take you back to maybe Ibrox, Celtic Park, Hampden, what's the ones that stick out for you?
I suppose some of the ones that stick out negatively would be the defeats in the 90s. One particular one actually that sticks out, and it has very much came to the fore, actually, the conversation I had with somebody earlier who asked me a question around when I was most disappointed. Was this season with the 10 obviously not happening? Was this the season we're most disappointed following the Celtic? And I said, no, probably when I look back, the season we didn't stop the old Rangers doing the 9 was the season 96, 97. And I remember kind of around mid-January or so, we got the offer of tickets to, myself and my dad offered tickets for the league game in the March. And it was the day before St. Patrick's Day. And ultimately, we got beaten 1-0 that day. And the bus was actually bricked on the way home. And those on the chariot will probably still remember it today. It was just a horrible day at Celtic Park. The Huns had ultimately won the 9. And I think we missed our ferry on the way home. And I remember coming in probably about 4 a.m. exhausted. My dad said, we're never, ever going again. My late mum, who was Celtic mad but never watched a game of football in her life, looked at me and she says, she says, don't be minding them poor old Huns. She says, sure, they don't have Mary in their lives, God rest them. She was a woman of great faith. And I remember just looking at it. It was a wonderfully light moment on, you were 15, 16 years of age. Celtic was everything then. And I'll never forget that. She just looked, don't mind them poor old Huns. Sure, they don't have Mary in their lives. That would be one now, from a defeat perspective, that would massively stick out. Just that sense of devastation. I think there's a lot of learning this season where a lot of people, there's such doom and gloom, and there's a kind of a collective sense amongst a lot of people that the club is really going to struggle. We're in COVID. There's a lot of uncertainty around finances of the club. But you know what? That day, the club and we looked gone. You know, there was a sense that this juggernaut the Rangers have is going to go on forever, and it changed very quickly. And I wrote a small piece in your own magazine. I do remember another thing of that day that jumped out, and it was at the time where we would have parked in Nuneaton Street. All the buses did. And getting on the bus after the game, and there was that silence. We've all got on a bus after defeat, and you're met with this silence, which is the complete opposite to what we tend to use of your image of a bus hopping and stuff. But there was graffiti outside the bus, and it just said, Celtic FC, we shall rise again. And it just stuck with me. You know, I pulled away, and that sentence, I quietly just kept it in my head. And 3 weeks later, it was over. We were beaten by Falkirk in the Cup. I tell you, I thought to myself, well, the fellow who wrote that graffiti now was a lot more optimistic than me. But lo and behold, 12 months later, we go and stop the 10. And we've had a kind of a wonderful run of the last 20 years. So certainly, sometimes it is true. Sometimes it is often darkest before the dawn.
Yeah, and we had Jackie Meaton on the podcast last week, Ciaran, and you know, Jackie had seen the 9 in a row, and he'd been to a European final before he emigrated to Canada. And like, when I used to hear all the stories, especially some of the brilliant stories that are told on the boat, some of the older boys are just, you know, the great storytellers. You know, the stories with the cattle boats and the cattle getting off the boat before the fans, and you know, bits and pieces. And you'd hear them talking about Lisbon, and you'd hear them talking about the 9 in a row, and you know, great players like Billy McNeil and Kane Dalglish, and you know, we were going through some barren times, and I could never have envisaged that I would see 9 in a row, and I certainly didn't think I'd get to a European final, but we did, and we also done that magnificent quadruple treble, which you wrote a great piece in the fanzine about. So, like, we've really enjoyed it. Since the new co have come back, you know, I suppose the writing was on the wall maybe when we played them in the League Cup. We could see they were improving, and maybe we were going back. But, you know, when you think to the Dembele, you know, demolition of them, and you also think of Eddie coming off the bench in Ibrox when we're down to 10 men. These are wonderful, wonderful memories, and recent years as well.
No doubts about it. The League Cup, will you touch on? I thought that was very special. I unfortunately had seen us play the old Rangers, I think, 3 times in cup finals, and we've been beaten in every one. So I'd never been at a cup final when we beat a team called Rangers, and that was special for me. And I actually remember walking out that day with the rain piling on me, and I thought of all the guys who were there in '92 when we played the old Huns in a semi at a pissing rain, Hampden Park. And what I often think was probably '92, if you maybe look at, there was a sort of '93 Celts for Change took up shape. '92 was probably the lowest point in the club's existence. You know, there was a real sense of helplessness. We have a semi-final against the old Huns at Hampden. The rain teaming down. they go down to 10 men early on and they beat us 1-0. And in some ways, I remember thinking for older guys or guys that maybe were at that game who had now passed, there was a sense of revenge almost with that League Cup game. That was one I really enjoyed walking out. And for some reason, I just straight away thought of Hampton 92. That was our revenge. That was a special one. And I know what you're saying. Certainly there was a concern about a performance that day, but it was a special one. Then back to the wall ones can be really, really special. For me, the last time I was at Ibrox was the 5-1. That was really, really special. The first time I was at Ibrox was the very first time I was actually on a plane. We got beat 4-0, March 2000. We would go to lose the league by 21 points, and you said, this is gone. Again, there was that sense of complete helplessness. Martin O'Neill comes in, and the rest is history, as I say.
Yeah, I walked out of Ibrox as well, Ciaran. I was there for the 5-1, and we beat them 6-2. And they beat us. I think it was 1-0 at half time. I think Henrik equalised, and then they went. And I always remember, like, the next day, the newspapers, Dick Avik had said in his press conference, because we'd gone on the bail straight after, so we hadn't seen anything. But on the way home the next day, he'd said, now maybe we will bring a video out. And I just went, you cheeky bastard, because we'd brought out the 6-2 video. So yeah, like there is them moments, but like Celtic Park rocking when you play them is magnificent. Beating them in a cup is magnificent. But when you beat them in Ibrox, and that stand, the Broomloam end it's because if you can kind of paint the picture for people that maybe haven't been to a game in Ibrox. Before the game, everyone's on the roundabout looking who hasn't got a ticket, and all the usual heads are down. They've a ticket, they've a spare ticket, but they're just waiting for someone to come up. So if you meet someone that hasn't got a ticket, you're saying, look, hang by him there, and you say, look, if you've hang spare, you give him a ticket, and the people I'm talking about. There's 4 or 5 always have a couple of tickets. Then you'll head around and maybe get a coffee or a burger at the fans outside, and they're paying for our blood, and there's a bit of there's the police line, and you're so nervous going in, especially for them 12 o'clock kickoffs, because you could have a hangover as well, which makes it worse because if you've been over the night before. But you go in. But when you score, like I remember Lee Griffiths behind us. I remember Wayne Rooney at a game in Ibrox when Keane was playing. And Keane was outstanding that day. It was probably the best game he played for us in a short time. But when that ball goes in, and the back of that, it's like it's shaking. And you know that you've come to their patch and you've turned them over. And, that's one of the highs of the season, going there and turning them over. But when you don't do it, it's gut-wrenching coming out, and having the triumphalism.
Yeah, I definitely think the huddle for me is at Ibrox, and that Bloomin' Road stand is the moment for me where you're probably most alive, just adrenaline course in every vein of you, that it's raw, it is football at its rawest. And I was fortunate enough to be there that Martin O'Neill season I touched on, the 3-0 day when Lubo got 2 and Henrik got his 50th. I was there then. The following season we won 2-0. Alan Thompson, who's been a great guest of yours many times, got one of the great Celtic goals at Ibrox. And I was there probably the best of all in many ways as a beach ball derby. I was a student in college. I'd been in Boa Vista. I'd come back and scraping pennies together, got offered a ticket on the Friday. And if I was to pick 4 or 5 days of my time following the Celtic that was most magical, I would certainly go that Thursday morning from the Charter to Boa Vista to coming back to Sunday at Ibrox. That was special. I then went on a barren run of about 12 or 13 games without winning. I used to bump into a friend of both of ours, Vincent Doherty, often, and we had this sort of sense we were both a hoodoo. And I remember the morning of that 5-1 game where under Brendan Rodgers' season, walking down Union Street and seeing Vincent and going, oh, no, not you again, and I sort of vowed after that 5-1 going, I'll never go back. I said, it doesn't get any more perfect than that, because I'd been at so many bad days that was a day I just walked out, and I didn't have a drink after for a long while. I just soaked it up and thought, we've gone there, this place where the first time I had been, we'd been beaten 4-0. We've gone there and won 5-1. I remember walking out that 4-0 and going, we didn't even get a goal. What would it be like to see to get a goal? That to win 5-1, it was the ultimate. But you are right. It's from a Celtic supporter's perspective, it's probably when you're at your rawest. It's certainly, it's the game that is the one where you don't sleep a whole lot the night before. It's raw. I think the new crowd have killed that to a certain degree with the 800s. You know that it isn't the same. You know, and I think that goes as well within our own ground. It's not the same as the fixture was before, but and certainly Sunday is going to be very different than an empty stadium. But listen, if you can do it at Ibrox, you know, is still the thing that's within you as a Celtic fan. So listen, hopefully that look goes Sunday. And the one positive I have Sunday is at least Vincent Doherty won't be at the game.
Ciaran, like you touch on Sunday now, and it defines our season. You know, it's massive. You know, we like the similarities from Scott Brown to Billy McNeil, captain for 9 in a row, didn't win the 10. Billy went out with a Scottish Cup. Wouldn't it be wonderful to see Scott Brown going out with a Scottish Cup?
There's no, and not many people have touched on that. You know, that the image you have of Billy McNeil, our greatest ever captain, the greatest ever Celt, of his final, is holding the cup that final in '75 against Airdrie, and it would be fitting for Scott Brown. I think these players owe it to him. I've been quite critical about Scott Brown from his earlier part of the career, but he has been a wonderful, wonderful captain to us over the last number of years, and it would be very fitting. And I think there's a sense amongst most Celtic supporters, given the season that's been in it, let's do this one for Scott Brown. You know, as much as a support, let's do this one for Brown. So it would be extremely fitting. If we could get over Sunday, kick on there, whatever happens with the manager come the summer. But let's get over Sunday first, have a look at it, and give us as a support something to smile about from what's been a pretty horrible season in a pretty horrible time in many people's lives.
Yeah, it has been, and it's you know, the football, we would have liked it to give us a lift, you know, when we're locked down or we can't see loved ones or whatever. But it wasn't to be, and you know, we'd fans arguing with fans, and we missed, you know, we missed the pub after the game or the bus down the road to have a proper conversation about the game with people that you share the same values. Because sometimes I'd see stuff on social media, but I don't know who the person is because it's a faceless account. Now, they could be wonderful people, but you're kind of looking, going, you know, who's behind this account? So I tend to not get in an argument with them. I kind of switched off social media halfway through the season and onto the WhatsApp groups, because the WhatsApp groups is your mates. And even within them groups, you've got a smaller group. If you don't want to listen to someone, you can just go into the smaller group. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't want to listen to me. But I always think, you know, there's a reaction straight after the game. But when you sleep on it, it can be a little different. You think a little different. But Ciaran, missing the point in the pub after the game with your mates, you know, bumping into someone in the airport, or in your case, the boat. It's just, I just can't wait. I can't wait to get. If someone said to me now, you know, I'd take a trial vaccine now, so I would, and they could stick it anywhere. If I thought I could just get back to Glasgow.
No, definitely. You're right about that piece post-match. And I remember going back even to our last defeat against the New Rangers, December 2019, when we got beat 2-1. And again, you get back to the bus, and that silence I talk about, there's not a peep. And you get down the road, and what many of the Irish buses do, we stop in Girvan, get out of Glasgow so guys can then get a pint and stuff. Stop in Girvan, the kids can get a chipper and stuff for that hour or two. And within them couple of hours, suddenly everything seemed okay again. You know, there is that collective sense of, and you're right, we touch on with rows of guys, but who guys have an incredible respect for the Celtic men, you know, and some of the best rows you have are these guys, because you know that they're genuine. But that's the piece post-match. You know, we're hearing a narrative now which is often being driven by those that want to be sensationalist more than actually real. And because we're all on social media now post-match, because we're not in pubs or on buses and stuff, the social media narrative has had a huge level of importance this season. And, you know, I agree, it can't come quick enough to get back to some semblance of normality. And, you know, it is only football, but for lots of us who invest an awful lot of time and emotion into it, out with family and obviously work and stuff, Celtic is the most important thing in our lives. And for me personally, you know, it has been a huge, huge void. And you know, I'm lucky I've kept going and working throughout the COVID and stuff, but I cannot wait like that to get back. And as much as I'll curse the alarm clocks at 3 a.m. and stuff, I jokingly think, geez, what we'd give now to be setting that alarm or not going to sleep at all with the dodgy sandwiches in the bag and listening to the same old just the ferry talking about how things are always better 30 years ago.
Yeah, and like when you talk about, you know, social media and the advances in technology, when the cup final, the lockdown was over for about 2 weeks, and we'd arranged to go to a pub in the middle of nowhere in Grange Gate, in the middle of nowhere for a bite to eat and a couple of pints. I think it was 6 of us, and we went in and we were socially distant, and it was kind of, you know, the inner circle of the Margaret's. It was all my kind of close mates that I'd been going to games with since the club formed, and we watched the game, and Eugene was the close to me, and the penalty shootout, and he was telling, "Oh, have faith," you know. And even when they got to 2-2, and he's normally the one that's not, but I was kind of panicking. But match was over. They put on whatever Premier League game was on. They put it on straight away. So we headed up to Kevy's. He has a bar at the back of his house. So we headed up there to watch the trophy presentation and to have a few more drinks. And we all went to go on our phones, but they didn't work, you know. So I said, what's the story with the Wi-Fi? It doesn't really work in the cold weather or something to that effect. So we had no phones, but we had a wonderful night and we had a wonderful conversation. You know, and you know, that's what's been missing. But it would have been even better if we were in Glasgow, but we weren't. But you know, like, and take out social media, take out, you know, all the hype, take out the daily record, take out all the bullshit that goes with it. There's 11 men against 11 men. There's 8,000 of us used to be in Ibrox, or 8,000 of them in Celtic Park. You know, there's 11 men on the pitch, or sometimes 10 or 9. But it's down to them then. You know, as fans, we go to game, we have our passion, we have our point. But at the end of the day, Ciaran, there's 11 men taking to that field on Saturday or on Sunday now, whether there's fans in the ground or not in the ground. And they owe us something. And they owe themselves something because they're better players than they performed this year.
What I do, there's professional pride involved, where no doubts they owe us something. And, you know, you touched on earlier, no matter what pub, it could have been the best pub in the world you were in, it could have been the greatest food, nothing beats being there, you know. And we touched earlier on the ferry, and anyone who's travelled on the ferry and stuff will know that moment when all the buses depart the ferry on the road from Cairnryan to Glasgow, and you just see a convoy of 10, 12, 15 buses ahead of you. And you know, in that moment, it's like we're an army. You know, it gets that feel. There's nothing like being there. And these players seriously owe the support big time. You know, we stumped up. We've never, as a support, been found wanting. You know, and I think this season has been a season to forget, but they owe us something small to give it some level of positivity, and it needs to start Sunday. You know, let's look at Sunday, and then we'll take it game after game after that. But you know, what's left? 6, 7 games this season. I don't know. Taking into cup games and stuff, and by God, you're right in that. Not every one of them, but a large cohort of them have left themselves down professionally massively over the last number of months, and we've something small to salvage, and there's a magic with Celtic in the cup. You know, I know you David Potter on before, who's the Scottish Cup is Celtic's trophy, you know, and wouldn't it be a fitting way for Scott Brown to end his time lifting that trophy? And as I touched on with the Billy McNeil piece, you know, that's the visual image I have of Caesar's last game, and as his time with Celtic is holding that cup against Airdrie in 75, and I just think it'd be a fantastic ending for the Bruni. And awful shame nobody's going to be there, but let's end the way it should, and the way it should end for him is holding that cup in May.
Yeah, here, Ciaran, and it was great to have Eddie on as well. You know, when Eddie was on, we were speaking about the '95 Cup final, and Tommy, you know how special it was to Tommy Bones, but this could be a really special one for Scott Brown.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's Scott Brown he's a wonderful record in it. Like, you think of ourselves as a support in the cup final. It has been such an event for us over the last few years. I know Eddie spoke about how he gets his attire for the cup final, but we all have our wonderful cup day routines and memories, particularly of the treble. I think them three cup finals particularly were ones that stood out. Just when I think of cup finals, and you asked about good and bad days earlier, to my forever shame, I remember that the week after we played the Black Sunday in '05, we played Dundee United in the Cup. And I would say it was the only time I ever watched the Celtic, and in that moment, I don't care how we do. I was so floored by it. And retrospectively, I look back and I'm so glad we won it. Because again, it was Martin O'Neill's last game at the club and stuff. And I was probably too caught up in the emotion of what had happened the previous week. But, it's not just about now for Scott Brown and this group. It's about looking back and looking back at years to come and going, what a fitting way to finish a career that, as a Celtic captain, has only been surpassed by Caesar himself, which isn't bad company to be in, let's be honest.
Yeah, unbelievable. He's been brilliant. Ciaran, it's been a pleasure. It's been great to see you. I look forward to seeing you in the flesh. And we can have one of our top 10 conversations. So listen, thanks very much for coming on Celtic AM, and hopefully we'll get you back on, or maybe back in the podcast at some stage.
Brilliant. Look forward to and fingers crossed for Sunday, Andrew. Hail, hail.
Hail, hail, my friend. Great to catch up with Ciaran again. I always love a chat with Ciaran. Great person. Outside Celtic as well, does some great work within the community, as I said before, and through his job as a social worker. Another person from Nave Park I want to give a shout out to is Pierce, who I don't know personally, but he started a new podcast called The Patriot Game with Martin Murphy from Edinburgh. And I know Martin because Martin was on Celtic AM with us in Malone's talking about dementia and how he cuts homeless people's hair and other gentlemen, or even some younger gentlemen who are suffering from dementia. And he does some brilliant work. Well, he was doing before the lockdown. I'm not sure how he's fixed now. And there's another lad from Belfast involved as well. And Liam Kelly, who writes a little for us in the fanzine and on the website, was one of the guests on, I think it was episode 2. And I think within the first week, they had 2 episodes. I didn't listen to the first episode, lads, sorry, but I did listen to the second episode. And the best of luck to you. I know how hard it is to get a podcast out because there's so many now. But I know you're all genuine Celtic fans, and I'm looking forward to listening to the first episode back and more episodes in the future. Another podcast I want to give a shout out to is the Homeboys. They done a wonderful 5-episode package for a fiver for the Cana Foundation, and they raised a good few £1,000. I've listened to 3 so far, still have 2 to go. I think my favourites are Harpo's kind of Desert Island disc type podcast with former world snooker champion John Higgins, who comes across as an absolute gentleman. I bumped into John once or twice through his brother and Joe, and he's everything in the podcast that he was when I met him. A real down-to-earth Glasgow boy. And it's wonderful. And the selection of music I loved. There was a bit of soul in it. And I was surprised at the end when he spoke about musicals. And I think his kids are involved in musicals. So if you get to check that podcast out, I'm not sure if it's still available, but I'm sure if you contact the boys and you donate a £5, they'll send you on the package. And another one I really, really enjoyed was the 2 Jasons, which was Jason Higgins, John's brother, older brother, wiser brother maybe, or not so wise, and Jason Maloney, who's a Shamrock Rovers fan who also loves a bit of the Celtic. And I want to just say get well soon to Jason Maloney, because he's been suffering from COVID. And we want you back writing for the fanzine, you lazy so-and-so, because your stuff is always magic and always well received when we stick your articles in. But they just come too rare, Jason. So best of luck to the Patriot Game podcast and continued success to the Homeboys. They're out on Friday nights as well. And I suppose that podcast is the closest you'll get to going down the pub on a Friday night for a few pints with Celtic mates during the lockdowns. So, as I said, best of luck to the boys. And if you Google them or they're on Twitter or social media, you'll be able to listen to the podcasts. Anyway, that's enough promoting the fellow podcasts and fellow fanzines. Look forward now to my conversation with Scott McDonald from his home in Australia. And I thank Scott because he's always very quick to get back to us when we ask him to do anything. He is a player that broke my heart before he came to Celtic. But he also set me heart racing in big games in the Champions League and against Rangers. And he proved a lot of people wrong when he came to Celtic. There was a lot of doubters. And he got stuck in and he formed a great partnership up front with Yandy Vendigodi Hesselink. So that was a bad Dutch accent. So here's how we got on chatting to Scotty. Well, Scotty, welcome back. This is Celtic AM. We had you on the podcast. So, folks, make sure you check out Scotty on the podcast. It was almost a year ago when we spoke, and I'm still in lockdown, but your life is back to normal.
Yes, it is. I'm sorry to hear that. Also, that you're still in lockdown. But yeah, over here in good old Australia, we're enjoying life. I think only of the last couple of weeks, we've actually had a couple of cases and we've had masks on, and we had a mini lockdown for about a week, but we came out of that and back to the new normal, as they say.
So life is good. I see you've got a good tan now.
Well, I live in Queensland, so it's sunny all year. It's the sunshine state, as they call it. So yeah, it's hard not to. I don't rub it in anymore.
Well, I put my shorts on to bring the dog for a walk last week, and because it was a lovely sunny day, and by the time I got back, it was snowing.
I've just seen that snow in April, for everyone. Back there, it's been crazy. But hopefully there's a bit of sunshine to come and everyone can get out and enjoy it. Fingers crossed for all you guys.
And hopefully that sunshine comes on Sunday now with the game removed when we play Rangers in Ibrox. Now, you've been to Ibrox. You've scored against Rangers and you've lifted a cup, which was the League Cup against Rangers. Now, Scotty, I've seen you on the pitch, and most of the viewers will have seen them games. But what I really want to get from you is I want to get what's it like in the build-up to these games, the pressure. Are you looking forward to it? The team bus, the atmosphere, and maybe what's it like for the players who weren't brought up in a Celtic way?
Look, I think they're fortunate this time round. Obviously, being a one-off game as well and playing at your rival's stadium. Did that go blank there?
No, you're back
sorry,
on.
I lost
you're back on.
Right, sorry about that. Yeah, look, just speaking about, playing at Ibrox, it's always a tough place to go. But obviously, with no fans being there, they've been there already this season. Played some excellent football, and if Beaton never got sent off, it could have been a different result completely on that day. And the performance that Celtic have had in recent games, they can take real positiveness from it. So I think there will be nerves. There's always nerves, especially being a one-off game as well. It's anything can happen on that day to really make the difference. Usually you're in that changing room at Ibrox, the tension starts to build. You go out for the warm-up, the hatred begins, and then the head gets switched on, and you get back in that tunnel and then get changed, get yourself ready, and then out to the fire, as they say, into the furnace. And look, I always enjoyed those occasions, especially playing in those big games and wanting to be the guy who makes the difference. I think all the players that are playing on the day want to be that guy. They envisage that, before they go out there. The whole week's build up, as we know, is crazy. I mean, from a reporter's point of view, all the press that's behind it, the media, and the players generally, when not in lockdown, you always had to be careful and mindful of where you were going, what you were doing that week. I remember a couple of occasions just driving along in Glasgow, and people would recognise you and they would pull up next to you and start giving you the finger. And you're like, "Roll, we know who they support." And there was little altercations and incidents like that all the time. But that's the fever of what this game brings, especially the week of. And it'll be no different. And look, this is a massive game for both clubs. Rangers will be looking to secure a double, keep, obviously been beaten in the League Cup already, but Celtic will want to put one over them. They've not done it yet this year, so they really are desperate to get that. And obviously John Kennedy, who's still pushing for the managerial job, albeit we're more inclined to say that it's going to be Eddie Howe or it's going to be another manager that's going to be in charge. But for John, it would be great for his CV if he was able to get over the line and win a Scottish Cup in charge at Celtic and on to whatever he's going to do next, or if he does stay at Celtic Park as an assistant if he doesn't get the job. So I think it's, for the likes of Scott Brown, this is a massive game, the biggest game, one of the biggest games of his career, because Scott, for all the trophies he's won, I certainly think to be the last team standing in Scottish football that season, his final season, and to win a Scottish Cup on that day is none more fitting for the man and for the career he's had at the football club. So fingers crossed Celtic can do a job on the day and reach a final and be victors.
Yeah, he would mirror Billy McNeil, because Billy won 9 in a row. He failed to do 10 in a row. And the 1975 Cup final, when he was lifted up high, lifted the cup, was his last game for Celtic. So it would be a fitting for Scott to do the same.
Yeah.
But there's also from a fan's point of view, like Ibrox, since they took away the allocation before the lockdown for the Celtic fans, and vice versa, them coming to Celtic Park. I had Ciaran Kenny on the show today as well, and Ciaran, from a fan's point of view, spoke about how they killed it, because there was 8,000 of us behind the goals, and when the Celtic team would run out, the buzz we would get from the colour and whatever Tifo was doing, and that included Beach Ball Sunday. What was it like? What was it like when you run out as a player and run towards the Celtic fans in Ibrox?
The best, because you were going to war. Like you were going to someone else's turf, basically other country, and you were trying to invade it. And you had that whole end with your supporters. There's none better feeling. And obviously for me, I was fortunate enough to have a great occasion there and scoring the winner at that end on the day. Winning 1-0. It was a day I'll never forget, and probably one of the best goals I scored for the club. But one of the most memorable days as well, to win an Old Firm game and get the only goal, and to be at Ibrox as well. It was, that's what dreams are made of. They really are, and you get to give their fans a little bit as well, which is always enjoyable.
Yeah, we did love you that day. For us, the first thing about going to Ibrox is making sure you have a ticket. Because it's hard to get. It's hard to get tickets because, everybody that goes to Inverness and Aberdeen and, they all want a ticket. But then you've also got, I've seen Wayne Rooney at a game and in with us.
Yeah, I've been at games as well. I was there the day when all the fans were throwing the peperamis on the pitch. Actually, that was the same year that what happened. Craig Bellamy ended up scoring the winner there. And it looked like the league was finished, and obviously it wasn't. So I don't want to really talk about that anymore.
And either the voice, Scott, because this is a feel good show, and that's me.
Sorry, but my experiences as a fan was brilliant, and that day was unreal. And to be in there and experience it, there's no better day than being, there at your rival's pitch and going away from home. I think it beats, obviously, winning and beating them at Celtic Park. If you're there that day, it's always a day of remember that day. When you're talking to your mates, and you always say, that was a day we were there, and this happened and that happened. They're always hugely memorable days, especially when you win those games. Everyone that's been there will always remember it.
Yeah, and I don't know what it's like for the players, but there's always a special feeling when the huddle is done in Ibrox. I don't know what it is. Yeah. It's just, this is it, boys. This is war. That's exactly the kind of feeling you get.
You're putting the flag down, basically.
Yeah.
And you're invading the territory.
Like your goalkeeper, Arthur Burridge. Arthur would he would just wind them up so much. Cult. Arthur had cult status with us, and not only that, I think he was the best goalkeeper I ever seen for Celtic, and that included, like, people will go on about Fraser Forster, but for me, Arthur Burridge was the best goalkeeper, and and a wonderful story about Arthur Burridge when he was at Bournemouth. I got an email from the secretary of Bournemouth, wanted to know how someone in the club wanted to subscribe to the fanzine, and I'm going, so I sent out the subscription details. We got payment, and I posted it to Bournemouth Football Club. No name, no, and I got a picture back with Arthur. They emailed me back a picture with Arthur for getting the fanzine, and I just thought, this is quality, because years before that, we'd had him on the cover, and the slogan was "Blessing yourself is not a crime," because he was getting half for blessing himself. So obviously he picked that copy up in Glasgow, and then I don't know how, but it was actually the belly was on the front, so it's a while ago. But it was a big buzz for me to be able to tell the boys at the bar to subscribe to the fanzine. But at the other end of the pitch, then you mentioned the goal. Tell us a little.
Look, I just remember it getting flicked on by Samaras at the time, by Sammy, and I had Broadfoot pinned, and it just came to me nicely on my chest. The one was flicked on, and I was always one when I played with the centre forwards to tell them, and Big Yam was the best at it. It was like, if you're going to flick it on, just flick it on backwards. Then I know exactly what you're going to do. Don't be flicking it to the left or be flicking it to the right, unless I'm making a run and it's obvious and you can visually see that. Otherwise, I'm always going to be behind you, right? And I want you to just flick it on like that and then spin and try and be available, or else I'll try and roll. So it was just that perfect occasion where Sammy's done that. He's flicked it and then he's rolled it one way, and Broadfoot's been caught probably on the wrong side of me, and as soon as I knew I had space, and for a split second there, it took an eternity just for the ball to drop to the perfect height for me to be able to hit it. And I always remember being slightly more composed at that point to wait for the right time to actually strike it, and I couldn't have hit it any sweeter. It was just, there was no chance, for the guy who's still in goal for them, who we know is an excellent keeper. Alan McGregor, he's been fantastic for them, unfortunately, at times. But on that day and that occasion, he just absolutely had no chance. It was an absolute rocket into the top corner. So that was a lovely feeling. And then you just see the place erupt, right in front of you. And it's actually, you want to go and jump in there and be part of it, but you're sort of going, no, I have to compose myself a little bit here. I'm going to get into trouble. So, but it was a great feeling. And then obviously at the end, the celebrations, as always, when you win a game at Ibrox, and you like to rub salt in the wounds, and it's fantastic to do that with your own fans. So, hopefully we'll have those occasions back, soon enough again, fingers crossed.
Yeah, look, we if to take away the tickets from us was it was a low point. But I was at the game. I was at the game when we hammered them in Ibrox, and the directors all stayed. The Rangers directors, obviously we stayed in the stadium after celebrating, but all the Rangers fans were gone, bar maybe a handful of nutters who stand in the corner and give us fingers and shoot us with their fingers and bits and pieces. But the board of directors were all outside. They never went into the boardroom. They were having a talk, and what came out of that was they took our allocation away. And I firmly believe that, because they stood out watching us, which is unusual because the directors normally are gone. Once the players go off the pitch, the directors could go as well. So I firmly believe that, and because now to try and get a ticket is like
so hard. With only being like 800 or whatever it is.
Yeah,
it's so difficult.
And before you could go over, because you'd be in the dressing room, but on the roundabout outside Ibrox where the Celtic fans congregate, I said it to Ciaran earlier on, there's always 4 or 5 bankers there. There's 4 or 5 have either big supporters clubs. They've always got tickets, and they'll hang there, Scotty. And if you've got your ticket but your mate hasn't, you'll go up and introduce them and say, look, if you've anything spare before before, the game, will you give it to him? Oh, I've none spare. And you say to me, stick there, because if he hasn't got a ticket, no one has a ticket. And I remember one day, there's the family in.
Yeah, the family's just come through the door.
Say hello to them.
It's crazy time. I'm on a recording, guys. Right? leave me be, please. Shut the door. Sorry about that, Andrew.
No, that's brilliant.
Sorry,
that's
everyone.
Brilliant. That's a live and exclusive.
Yeah, just back from football training.
I went over to a game one Sunday morning with a gang of us. I think we had 10 tickets, and there was a lad picking them up for us the night before, but he got arrested.
Oh no!
And he was in the cell with the but we didn't know this. So with about a half an hour to kick off to go, I'm standing waiting for the tickets with all the lads, and someone comes up and says, "Look, I got my ticket off him last night, but he got lifted for drunken disorderly or something." So I went, "You're kidding me." So I had no tickets. So I then went to all the bankers, and I ended up getting everybody a ticket by 2 people. So that just goes to show you the tickets are around that roundabout. But the problem was, now they're not. So if you haven't got a ticket now, you don't even go for the weekend, because you just say. But now another game, Scotty, that I want to ask you about, and I'm just going to get the team up here.
I could probably give you it.
Right, go on. League Cup final.
Yeah, I believe it was Hinkle, Caldwell, McManus, OD, left back, Nakamura, was it Hartley, who played, Aidan McGeady, there was me and Samaras. I'm missing a midfielder, Paul Hartley, and I don't think it was Barry Robson, because I think he was injured at the time. So I'm going to say it was Scott Brown. Am I right?
The team I have in front of me here is Borwick, Hinkle, Lovins, McManus, O'D, Caldwell, Nakamura, Scott Brown, Hartley, McGeady, McDonald, Samaras. I
got one wrong. I got Hinkle wrong. Hinkle wasn't playing. Caldwell was playing right back, obviously, if Lovins was playing.
Yeah. But you've OD, McManus, Lovins, and Caldwell. So maybe one of them was playing. Up beside Scott Brown. That's a. No, it would have been handy, Scott Brown.
Gaz Caldwell actually played right back a lot. Still, he was in between at times. He could play right back, so he would have played right back. Lovins and McManus centre backs, and Darren O'Day played left back at that time. He was first choice left back at that time, because Lee Naylor got injured, and then Darren just fitted into that, and he done well on a couple of occasions, and Gordon kept with him. He did, didn't he? He certainly did. Obviously, getting on the end, that header from Nakamura's, I think it was a free kick, wasn't it? It was a superb header.
But I look at that team, and I remember that day. So well, because 0-0, and then I don't know what it's like for a player, but as a fan, you've no nails left, and you've kicked every ball, you've been through every emotion, and then McGeady and OD, 2 Irish internationals, torn up. For an Irish boy, it doesn't get any better than that. But with Nakamura in your team and Arthur and Nets, you've always got a chance against anyone, because Nakamura was just magical.
Yeah, he was. We've got to remember how good a side Rangers were at that time as well. Pedro Mendes, Steve Davis, Barry Ferguson. I can't remember who was playing at the back. I think Carlos Quella was playing. Was he there, or was it the other big guy that came the year after that, possibly? Davey Weir. They had a really good side. They were very experienced. So you knew it was always going to be a tough game for playing against them, and it was quite an edgy game. There wasn't a lot in it. I think I had a really good chance before the end of 90 minutes to nick it and win it, and went through. I think it was a 1v1 rush. I think McGregor rushed out, and I just couldn't connect with it properly. So you go off the back of that and you think, oh God, maybe that was the chance of the day, and I failed to take it. But then extra time comes, and like you said, your special players turn up, and Nakamura delivers a fantastic ball, and obviously, Darren gets up the way he gets up and gets a great header, and obviously then the elation of that, it's again, that's what dreams are made of. I talk about going to Ibrox and scoring goals, but winning trophies and winning cup finals is something that I would have loved to have done more, without question, Andrew. And that was the thing that really hurt me probably when I left afterwards. Thinking, I just would have loved to have won, more accolades at the football club and more days like that, because the memories you have from that and the relationships that you have from those days, those special days, they're never forgotten between you and the players. And then it was capped off, obviously, right at the very end for everyone. The way Aid went through and hacked him down, got sent off. So that pleased all Celtic fans. And then he buried it to kill the game, and off we go celebrating thereafter. So it was truly magical. It was just unfortunate though at the very end of it, I got a tap on the shoulder, and there was the drug tester. So that was a huge disappointment for me, because there was me and Gary Caldwell that got basically hooked straight into the drug testing room after the game. After we lifted the trophy, we were straight in the drug testing room. We couldn't even go in and celebrate with all the boys. So that one time you lift the trophy, and we've seen all the celebrations, obviously, because we've got social media now and access to Celtic TV, and you see what the celebrations are like with the players and what they're doing. And when me and Gary come in, it was a morgue. It had all finished. Everyone had their celebration. The champagne was already sprayed everywhere. There's me and Gary trying to pick up the dregs, to celebrate in the end.
Scott, you see in a dressing room like that, right? So you're on a high, celebrating, drinking champagne, and as you say, we've all seen it now on social media and the team TV channel. But like, obviously, it's 120 minutes. Mentally, physically, the build up. It's a cup final, but it's a cup final against our biggest rivals. Like, are you just exhausted after?
You're heavily relieved. You're heavily relieved because of the pressure of the situation and what it means to a lot of people, and the expectations as well. And if you don't win it, how that will go down and how everyone will feel about that. At the time, that's all you can think of. There's not, there'll be a next time. That never goes through your mind. It's just a disaster, and you want to go and hide in a cupboard in your house somewhere for a week until the next game comes along to try and get over that agony. And also at that point as well, which didn't actually end up being the case, but you're thinking it's a psychological blow to either side, whoever loses it, with the title race in the hands it was. We were ahead, I don't know how many points, if it was 4 points or if it was 7 points going into that game. And then you go and beat them in the cup final, and you're thinking, right, psychologically now, we've got them. They're dead and buried. But again, that was to our own detriment. We let ourselves down that year by not picking up the points that we needed to win the title, and we handed it back to them. And that was the disappointment that season at the back end. We lost it on the last day. The reverse of the season before, and we were in the box seat. So that was, again, as much as the League Cup was an amazing thing, losing the league's always the big one. But there was so much riding on that game itself, like I said, because you felt like whoever won this game was going to have the upper hand into the final race to win the title.
Yeah, and you mentioned the league title that you did win at Celtic. That was an amazing run at the end of the season. Beat Rangers twice. Up to was it Big Jan scored? The header.
Yes,
we beat them twice. We beat them twice in 1 week, didn't we?
Yeah, and it'll always go down and remembered, and rightly so, as the Tommy Burns title.
Oh.
For everything that everyone had been through at that stage, and the sudden, the sudden obviously loss of Tommy to the whole Celtic family. It was only fitting. It was. And that will always be amazing and one of the best memories of my life and in my career, that night. And being at albeit it was at Tannadice, it didn't matter where it was for me. It was the only title I ended up winning, but it was my first one, and thinking, right, it doesn't matter. And just the way it happened, it was an amazing story, because no one gave us a chance with 8 games to go that we were ever going to be title content, or that we were right out the title race. So to win it was an amazing thing, and obviously it would have been amazing to have done it again at some other point, later down the track at Celtic Park, but it didn't happen for me for one reason or the other. But again, I never take anything back, though, because all the experiences and the memories are still so fresh in the mind. Like I said, we could talk about things, and I can still remember clear as day. I can still remember the party afterwards as well. That was good. As much as I probably couldn't remember much at the time, looking back, it was great. And the minibar on the way to the journey to 29, which is where we went for the after party, was such a laugh. I won't name names, but there was a few mad ones on there.
Well, I can imagine one. There's like a king.
Yeah, possibly.
That's just, it's funny every time, no matter when we do anything about Celtic, Tommy Bones comes up. And can I just ask you, the backroom team and Gordon Strachan that night, because obviously Gordon goes back a long way. He played against Tommy. They would have been in Scottish teams together. He was in his backroom staff. So everyone kind of, like in football, especially Scottish football, knew Tommy. Have you any memories, or can you share anything about the emotions of that night?
Yeah, I can. It was very emotional, and it was very emotional for all of us. But there was obviously certain people in particular who were close to Tommy, the likes of Darren O'Dea and Aidan McGeady. They were brought through the youth ranks through Tommy, and had been all the way through with him. So it was very heartfelt, and for the manager and all the coaching staff as well, because they had been there and knew more than what we had throughout the whole occasion. We were guarded and protected from it, because we had to do the job on the pitch, So the manager took more of a responsibility in terms of that, and the relationship he had with Tommy. And I whether or not Gordon's admitted this or not, I genuinely have heard and believe that it was actually Tommy who convinced Gordon to stay on for that next season. In their chats before he, sadly passed away, that he didn't want Gordon to leave the football club, and he made sure that he promised him that he would take the club further on. And that's why, Gordon did what he did. I think once he'd done 3 in a row, I think he felt that was probably, as far as he could go with the club, and was looking to step aside. But when Tommy asked him to stay and be part of the football club longer, I think obviously he promised him that, and he did it for Tommy, more than anyone, because he wanted that to be the case.
Yeah, and it's funny, like Gordon, was not a Celtic man, but his brother-in-law is. I know his brother-in-law, and he when his brother-in-law and Gordon, Dave would talk, Gordon couldn't get why this guy was so fascinated with Celtic, and how much it meant to him. And but then he said when he took the job and he became part of the club, a club that he played against, when he became part of the club, and I think now when you hear Gordon, when he's working for Celtic TV or one of the other channels,
he's a fan.
Yeah, I think I definitely think that the club touched him.
Yeah, I think so, and I think, albeit through that occasion, everyone's seen a different side to what they normally see in the panto villain of Gordon Strachan at times, especially from a media perspective. But the graceful man that he was and showed throughout that period to everyone, to all the outside world, through that period, through and how he obviously tributed, Tommy, for the man that he was, and how Gordon went about his job from then on in, and before that as well. I think, going back to Ibrox, there's a great story for me about my first occasion at playing for Celtic in an Old Firm game was at Ibrox, and sadly we lost the game, and we lost it quite heavily. I think it was 2 or 3-0 at the end of the day, and we were very, very poor. And and after the game, Gordon had said his bit, and he wasn't he didn't say too much. He just was hugely disappointed in us. And then obviously he put it to the floor. But have you got anything to say, Gary? No. Paul, Tommy, have you got anything to say? And Tommy generally would go, nope, no, fine. But on this occasion, Tommy lost it, you know, and that was never seen from Tommy, you know, in terms of talked about what it meant to him and what it meant to those people out there and how you'd let everyone down today and you need to take a good look at yourselves and that jersey you're wearing and what it means to you because of what it means to everyone else out there. And that needs to change from next week on. And it was, you know, along those lines, not word for word, but it was like, you know, someone hitting you, you're going, Jesus Christ. You know, because this man was Celtic, he was everything to the club. So when Tommy spoke, you listened, you know, and there's some fantastic stories. I mean, for me, he unfortunately only experienced time with Tommy throughout that season as a player and him as a coach for me. I'd had experiences previous when I was growing up, obviously meeting him when I was a young fan and when he was manager there and everything like that. And it was surreal that now he's my coach. You know, I was like 12, 13, coming to the park, looking for photos as everyone does. And there he is, one of your coaches. And he pulled me aside one day at pre-season. And it was him who really assured me, you know, like, obviously because of the history that I had at the club, that you're a Celtic man, you belong here, and you're good enough to play here, son. Don't let anyone else tell you any different. And from that, if Tommy's going to tell you that and say that to you, you were like, well, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for everyone else. And I just grew in huge confidence. I'll never forget the day. It was in Switzerland. We went on a 10-day tour at the start of Switzerland. I think we were like day 2 or day 3 in. And I was performing quite well. And Tommy come and put an arm around me. He just had that special effect on people. And he always knew when to lift the spirits within the camp as well. He was a very funny guy. Yeah, a very, very funny guy. And look, he always put a smile on people's faces. You know, and just thinking about him, it's he was a great man.
Yeah, I just got goose pimples there when you spoke about, I suppose, his passion in the dressing room and what it meant to us outside. So I'm just going to leave the interview there, Scott, because I don't think I can. It's actually quite emotional. So thanks for sharing that with us.
No, it is, and I remember sharing that story with his son about how he pulled me to the side and how that made me feel, because he could do that to people. He really could. You know, just that, him speaking at times was just, I'm getting emotional now too. It's like, wow, you know, he was just a great overall, and that's why we celebrate him so much.
And hopefully, Scott, will be celebrating the weekend. We can raise a glass maybe.
I'll be watching, don't you worry.
To Tommy. Listen, thanks very much for popping in to chat to us. And you know, the last time, I suppose, you were on Celtic AM, you were in the flesh in Malone's, but life's a little different now for everybody.
Absolutely. But hopefully you'll come out of it and everyone's stay safe and healthy. And like I said, hopefully everyone can get out there for that summer sunshine. Not that there's much of it over there, but I hope you enjoy it.
and don't forget, the invitation is still open for when we get back to Thailand.
Oh, yeah, don't you worry. I'll be up for that. Absolutely. I'd love that.
Thank you very much, Scotty, for sharing some wonderful memories with us of your time in Ibrox, on the terraces and on the field. Great to get an insight into how it felt to score at Ibrox. Folks, well, that's it for this weekend, I suppose. Enjoy the match, and hopefully we'll be celebrating. Win, lose or draw, but we'll all be Celtic fans in the morning. Thanks to everybody who took part, Ciaran Kenny, all the Celtic fans, David Potter and Scott McDonald, and to you for watching or listening. If you want to support us, you can do so by visiting CelticFanzine.com, where you can become a member, subscribe, buy, or donate for the price of a pint or a coffee. We thank you all for your support and for watching. We play out now with the Blarney Pilgrims, 200 miles from home, and it's lovely to play out with them, and a wonderful video it is too, with some wonderful banners from the old breaks clubs in it. because the Blarney Pilgrims have a big connection with Nave Porrick and the bus. And this song is about all those long hours spent travelling to see Celtic on the bus. So, folks, keep the faith and stay safe and enjoy the week. And don't forget to check out the podcast with Paul Heaton and our little From the Terraces with Joe Miller. Thank you.
Party's over, the bus is quiet now. The duty free's no longer going round. The boys down the back have stopped their singing. They're trying to get their heads down. The beer's too warm for drinking, and the coffee, well, it's way too cold. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're still 200 miles from home. It seems like we've been on the road forever. The people we've met, the stories we could tell. But it's been less than 48 hours since we bade Govan Hill a fond farewell. But didn't we have the good time? There's nothing like going with the sons on the road. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're still 200 miles from home. Ask the driver, would he please turn the tape to the other side? And Christy Moore singing John of Dreams will be our lullaby. Tired and weary, and I've spent all the money for my rent. I've already put my name down for the next trip. I wouldn't miss it for the earth. But right now all I want is my own bed. As for work, don't think I'll be going. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're still 200 miles from home. Ask the driver, would he please turn the tape to the other side. And Christy Moore singing John of Dreams can be a lullaby.